Kim Iverson tweeted, land grab pushing them south so they can take the north. Israel has officially informed the UN to evacuate its staff and advised civilians to evacuate to the southern part of the Gaza Strip. Now, Mark, we have this over here, which is really important. I really want to understand the geopolitical ramifications of what could come of this situation. I would like you to shed some light on this situation. Iran and the Saudi leaders discussed Israel's war crimes in Palestine. Iranian President Raisi and Saudi Crown Prince MBS held their first ever telephone conversation late on 11 October to discuss the need to end the war crimes against Palestine. State-run news agency Saudi press agency said MBS stressed the necessity of adhering to the principles of international humanitarian law and expressed deep concern for the dire humanitarian situation in Gaza and its impact on civilians, and reaffirmed the kingdom's stance against targeting civilians in any way and the loss of innocent lives. MBS doubled down on his support for the Palestinian cause and his support for efforts aimed at achieving comprehensive and fair peace that ensures the Palestinian people's legitimate rights. According to Mohammed Shahidi, political advisor to the Iranian prince, the crown prince warned that failing to recognize Palestinian rights would further inflame the situation, adding that cooperation between Riyadh and Tehran can contribute effectively and quickly to putting an end to the conflict inside Palestine. Raisi emphasized that the issue of Palestine cannot be solved without giving the Palestinians full rights. The current situation in Palestine results from repeated miscalculations by Western countries led by the U.S., Raisi said, and this happened right before the show. Saudis put Israel normalization on hold in blow to U.S. goals, something that I believe that Donald Trump worked on, Professor Sleboda, with the Abrams Accords, trying to get the Saudis, and Israel to sit down and talk for peace negotiations. What does this mean right now when it comes to Iran and Saudi coming together to say, you know what? You know, we saw Lindsey Graham saying, we got to see what the Saudis say. They can't just stay on the sidelines. You know, Nikki Haley, that they were kind of pointing the finger at the Saudis and saying, we're going to see what you're about right now. You're going to stand with us in Israel, at the very least condemn Hamas. But now we have this. Give us your insight to what's going on when it comes to Iran and Saudi Arabia agreeing that, no, this ain't all right.
Yeah. First, let me just comment on your piece on the UN. You talked about your first piece was about United Nations pulling staff out of Gaza. Already 2 days ago, Israeli airstrikes had killed 9 UN staffers in Gaza. I don't know if there's been more since then. That was the last number I saw. But they're not just killing Hamas. They're not just killing Islamic Jihad. They're not just killing Palestinian civilians. They're killing UN staffers too. Because
where's that reported? Just out of curiosity.
I believe it was AP or Reuters.
Oh, okay. I'm just because it's wild, the things that you just don't hear and that much.
Well, they're not going to repeat that information.
No one I know has said what he just said. No one I know.
Yeah, it's small print. You know, it goes by the news line. It's not allowed to penetrate the narrative. First of all, we'll come back to this, but I'm so glad you caught this and put this article on Saudi putting the Israeli normalization and with it the U.S. Saudi security guarantee deal that was a part of it on hold, because that is the key to everything that has happened in the past week. So,
okay,
you're all over.
Okay. So let's talk about why, because there's also, I have the Russian statement in this section 2 as well, right? And I think a lot of people don't understand that there could be a really spinning out of control. In other words, it seems like the empire is pivoting us closer to World War III. And this situation right here, because people will say, well, Russia seems to have good relationships with Israel. That doesn't matter. They have better relationships with Iran. And if, God forbid, something gets out of control where Israel goes a little bit too far with Iran and does somehow goat the Americans to come and get involved to attack Iran, just like all the war hawks like Lindsey Graham, Nikki Haley, all of them want, then this could really, Russia comes to the aid of Iran. United States and Russia now, here we are. We've already had the situation in the Donbass and the Ukraine. So it could spin way out of control.
Dude, I'm already seeing in my YouTube feed, I can't remember what it's called, business something. It's got to be some propaganda thing, but it's all about how Russia and Iran are working together to help Hamas. That just popped up the day after the attack. So I already see that narrative coming out that it's, Russia and Iran did this.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's dismiss that right there. Okay, Russia supports Palestine. Russia recognizes Palestine as a state. The Soviet Union did long time ago. Russia continued it. They support the cause of Palestinian sovereignty, but they have a problem with Hamas. Okay, and I have to admit, I've got the same problem. Hamas are Islamic. They are Sunni Islamic jihadists, right? And Russia they don't do Sunni Islamic jihadists. They don't. They had problems with Wahhabism in Chechnya. They had they fought Sunni Islamic Islamism in Syria, and it has to be said that Hamas betrayed their earlier patron Syria and turned on the Syrian government. So I don't know how much actual Russia was involved in the fights in the south with Hamas, not much, but Hamas joined forces with the jihadists in Syria against the Syrian government, the ones backed by the US, the ones backed by Israel, by the way, right? A lot of people forget Israel backed head chopping jihadists in Syria, terrorists, right? Because
still do, right? Still
they
do.
Just Hamas they backed probably
at one point.
So anyway, Russia does not support Hamas. They have not provided any support for Hamas since 91, right? They talk to them, but Russia talks to everybody, right? But they do not. And this because Russia, Putin is responsible for every evil in the world, according to, Lindsey Graham and the other frothing genocidal lunatics in the U.S. political elite. But they've tried to link Russia to this as much as they try to link them, to it rained on a festival in southern Japan yesterday. Putin must be responsible controlling the weather. This nonsense. Anyway, you don't have to listen to me on that. Listen to the Israeli ambassador to Russia, right? Not the Russian ambassador to Israel. The Israeli ambassador to Russia said that these accusations trying to link Russia in any way supporting Hamas, he said, are nonsense. Just nonsense, quote unquote, nonsense. So if you can't take the Netanyahu government on that, at least, well, then, we're living in alternate realities. But so, Russia they don't have a military alliance with Iran. They have a strategic partnership. Relationship is closer to that between, say, Russia and between the U.S. and Saudi, or between U.S. and Israel. They exchange technology. They help each other. They do joint exercises, right? But there's not a defense clause. If the U.S. attacks Iran, Russia is not obligated and probably would not get involved.
Really?
Yeah, really.
Wow. See, I thought quite the opposite. I thought
no, it's not like that.
Yeah.
China has a strategic partnership with Iran either, but they're not going to go to war with the U.S. over Iran. They may do lots of other things, but to go to direct war with the United States and start World War III, no, that's not the way these relationships work.
But once again, I think there was a kind of sitting back in the Ukraine, when it came to Russia the first time in 2014. And it seems like their attitude changed when Joe Biden got back in, when all the neocons came back on in. It seems like Lavrov, even his kind of, rhetoric had changed to like, I don't think you should be messing around in the Black Sea anymore. I'm just going to let you know. So it seems like it was more intensified where we're not going to allow these things to happen again. So that's why I thought when it came to Iran, you wouldn't see Russia step back. But you're saying quite the opposite.
They might provide arms. They might do to the U.S. now what the U.S. is doing to Russia and Kiev, right? You know, in Ukraine. They may back them in every way but direct conflict. But I don't think that they would probably. I mean, it would have to be a really extraordinary circumstance. If Russian military bases in Syria were hit by the U.S., right, Syria being an Iranian ally as well as a Russian ally, well, then that's a different story, of course. So, I mean, there are escalation paths that could lead to Russia getting involved in a U.S. Iranian conflict, but it's not automatic. It's not automatic.
Gotcha.
So the Crown Prince of Saudi meeting with the the president of Iran. This is huge. This is something. It still blows my mind how quickly. Lenin once said something about that. Decades pass and nothing changes, and then in just a moment you have decades worth of change. Something like that. I'm paraphrasing there. And this is what has happened. Saudi and Iran were bitter enemies for decades, right? As
mostly Sunnis and Shias, right? Correct?
Not just Sunni and Shias. I mean, that is, yes, it exists. It's historical. But it was far more about modern geopolitics. And the U.S. tripod for hegemony over the Middle East was the U.S. and their hub and spoke relationship with Saudi and Israel. Right? Which necessitated a degree of Saudi-Israeli peace, but also the enemy that they were focused on in the Middle East was Iran. All three were enemies of Iran. Well, that tripod in just the last year has just completely collapsed because Saudi said, you know what? I think that I see that the way that the U.S. has weaponized their control of the global financial and economic architecture, SWIFT, the IMF, the world, everything to go after Russia, to destroy Russia's economy, to cut the world's largest supplier of commodities, try to cut it out of the global market, which one was stupid and didn't work. And two, if it had worked, it would have tanked the entire global economy, right? The Saudis said, if they can do that to Russia, they could do that to us. And they didn't like that. So and also, I mean, there's a number of other reasons, but you can't really forget the personal animosity that exists between Mohammed bin Salman and Joe Biden. It's huge. Right? It is enormous. Yeah. So Saudi decided we are going to look for options in our foreign policy. We're not going to move completely away from the United States, but we want other options. We're going to join BRICS. We're going to join the Shanghai Cooperation as a dialogue partner. Our most important trade partner now, Saudi says, is China. And Russia is an important player in the Middle East, and we're going to deal with them. And why are we fighting with Iran? There's no reason. Mohammed bin Salman really has had a kind of, I don't know, a second birth, because when he came out of the gates, he was this fire breathing, I'm going to get involved in conflicts in Yemen and Libya and Syria. And he's like, well, that didn't work. And he's had a huge reassessment. He has grown so much, and the people around him, of course, maybe teaching him to a mature foreign policy. So, along with those options, one of the things Saudi has been being pushed to by the U.S., and they haven't given up their relationship with the U.S. They still get most of their weapons from the U.S., for instance, right? And that's a very important relationship, weapons supply. The U.S. wanted Saudi and Israel to normalize relations the way the U.S. under Trump had pushed a number of smaller countries in the Gulf to do. And if they would normalize relations and recognize Israel, exchange diplomats and everything, then Saudi would get a sweetheart security guarantee deal from the U.S., basically the same level as Israel. Military aid, good prices on military stuff, training, intelligence, the whole thing, a security guarantee. A lot like the word they keep using with the Kiev regime in Ukraine. Of course, there they don't really mean it. So Saudi was like, yeah, okay, right. That's the multi-vector foreign policy. They were considering it. Hamas, right, the Palestinians, they saw this. And for them, they understood this as an existential threat to any future of a Palestinian state and even the existence of a Palestinian nation in Palestine. Because if Saudi recognizes Israel, that is essentially dissolving Palestine.
Game over.
Because Israel is claiming the settlement, right? The ethnic cleansing and colonization that goes on a daily basis. They would have to then accept that. That would be part of it, and that would just be writing off Palestine as a state, as a nation. They'd be a refugee diaspora people like the Jews once were.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Can I stop you and ask you a question right now? Because the thing that's just kind of really, really blowing my mind is that Mohammed bin Salman was not the rightful heir to the crown, right? Like, once again,
well, that's there is no rightful heir.
He wasn't in line. Mohammed bin Nayef, right? The Langley trained, very close CIA, that type of prince was supposed to be next in line to, take the reins. Then it was switched up. I mean, isn't there a fear of that the West is going to back a coup in Saudi Arabia after this move right here?
Okay, so Saudi succession is actually not clear on that, right? There was the original king, and then after him, every one of his brothers became king in succession. But after all the brothers, the last one is on his deathbed now, right? He's the father of Mohammed bin Salman. Then who becomes the next king? Does it go back to the son of the first brother who served as the king? Or does it go to the son of the last brother, the one who's dying in office? That wasn't clear. So,
but there was a little war going on. There was, helicopter crashes. Yeah. There was like mafia stuff going on over there.
Oh, it was full on Machiavellian, Saudi royals, killing each other. Yeah.
How did MBS win? Like, how did he win that whole?
Because his father is the king right now. That's why.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
Yeah. But also, he somehow garnered support. Jared Kushner supported him, right? They were able to tap into the White House and say, "Hey, come back this pony, and we'll find a way down the road."
Yeah, well, one of the things he promised to do, which he has since backed out of, was to privatize Aramco.
Yeah,
right. The Arab American, the state energy company of Saudi, and the U.S. was really hot. They love privatizing state oil assets, right? That's they wanted a piece of that. Well, that went away eventually, but because he was promising to do that, that was the way some people, got on board with him. They also saw him as a progressive and, all these other things at the time. There was all kinds of claims.
I remember that.
Yeah. Well, he is more progressive, right, than the other. I mean, I've talked to young students from Saudi Arabia, and they're like, MBS is way more progressive than the other regime that was in play over there, that he has a way of handling the clerics a little bit different, especially when it comes to women's rights. I mean, this is what young kids from Saudi Arabia told me. I haven't talked to a lot, but a couple.
Have either of you ever heard of this? A cab driver taking me to the show, actually, this guy who's from Syria. He's an Armenian from Syria, who, by the way, they call it the minority Alawite group that runs Syria, Assad's ethnicity. Mm-hmm. They always say on the news, they're all minorities, the guy told me. That's just the strongest one. And they all like him because they protect the minorities from the Sunnis.
Oh,
yeah.
And he told me that Jamal Khashoggi, he pronounced it like Khashoggi or something.
CIA?
Was, Turkish intel. He goes, he's not a good guy. I never heard anybody talk about that ever.
Yeah.
There's one cab driver mentioned it, and I don't think he was connected to anything. It sounds like something people... Have you ever heard anything like that?
Did you do a show with him too, Mark? Because I know when you were on Crosstalk, Khashoggi used to go on every once in a while, so I don't know if you guys ever did a show together either.
No, we never did a show
All right.
together. Yeah, but yeah, you know, there's a lot of questions about this journalist that quote unquote that Mohammed bin Salman had killed, and the truth was he was an intelligence protege of the other guy's head of intelligence. Right, the guy that the U.S. wanted to put in instead of Mohammed bin Salman,
Naif, yeah.
His head of intelligence, his protege was Khashoggi.
Got it.
Yeah, he was intelligence. He was Saudi intelligence that got on the wrong side of the succession. That's what it was.
Oh, interesting.
About.
Okay.
So where does this situation with the Saudis and Iran now leave Saudi Arabia when in the eyes of the United States? I know Donald Trump, and I got, I want to talk about the Abraham's Accords too as well, and not the J.J. Abrams Accords, but the joke never hit. I'm glad you laughed.
The J.J. Abrams Accords.
The J.J. Abrams Accords.
Star Wars is bad now.
Please, but I mean, it completely left out the Palestinians. But where does this leave the Saudi Arabia? Where does this leave the kingdom in the eyes of the Americans? Because like I said, Donald Trump is taking full advantage of this whole situation. Biden blew this. This is all about.
He also said
so
Bibi
hard.
did. He's the only one I heard.
Oh,
say
well, I
Bibi.
got that clip today.
Yeah.
We'll go after that because I don't know. It's
no one else says that.
I mean,
nobody. So
one thing, Trump, right? He had good relations with both Saudi and Israel.
Yeah.
Really good relations, right? I mean, much better than with, say, NATO or the United Kingdom or other countries like that, So I would say if I were Mohammed bin Salman, I would seriously go around making sure that anyone that the U.S. could use to regime change him and put some other Saudi royal in his place is out of the picture. Because, it's got to be up for consideration.
Yeah.
Got to be up for consideration.
I mean, after BRICS and now this. I mean, this today. Can you take Mark down? This today, right here, ladies and gentlemen, the deal's off the table. Yeah. Right? And this has got to say, American foreign policy has got to be like, oh, no, he did not. Go ahead.
And who did that? Hamas did that. Hamas. You think, why did Hamas launch this Operation Al-Aqsa Flood? Right? Yeah, it was a terrorist operation. It was also an incredibly well-planned and executed, Mission Impossible. I mean, they were paragliding over Israeli walls. They were using drones to take out automatic machine gun emplacements and Iron Dome radars. They were doing naval. I mean, if they weren't the bad guys, I mean, they would be the next Mission Impossible stars. This was incredible. Yeah. And they completely pulled the blind over Mossad, right? They only a few handful of the Hamas Al-Qassam brigades, which are their military side. Only a handful of them were in on the plan, and only a few of them had even smaller number had the big picture. They did not use any. They don't use any phones. They didn't write anything down. They didn't use any digital communication, email, anything. Only word of mouth, person to person, trusted people. That was the only way. Except that they knew certain electronic channels and phones that Mossad was listening to. So they fed them a line of BS. They lulled Mossad. Oh, he said, "Oh, we don't have enough rockets. Oh, we can't get enough armament. Oh, we're having political difficulties in Gaza. We can't. No hope of launching attack. Maybe we should give up on this and just worry about economic recovery." Mossad bought it hook, line, and sinker.
Really?
In fact, yes, the Egyptians, right? The Egyptian government found out about it, though, because they actually have human intelligence inside,
Gaza,
the Muslim Brotherhood, which is, Hamas is just an outreach of the Muslim Brotherhood from Egypt, right?
Yeah.
So one of the things, Mossad got way too reliant, like the CIA often is, on signals intelligence, electronic data collection, and they didn't have any human intelligence still, people within Hamas, at least with any, authority reporting to them. So they
Okay.
dropped the ball. The Egyptians, though, they found out about it and they warned Israel 10 days, something's coming out of Gaza, something big. And Mossad just ignored them, right? Netanyahu had actually moved a lot of troops away from the Gaza wall, right? You know, the great, you know, prison cage there.
Mm-hmm.
And he moved them to the West Bank where he was pursuing, you know, these settling operations. Because he thought Hamas was under control. He thought it was well managed, and he believed what Mossad was telling him about all of this. So they ignored all of this, and they got caught the way they did, where, you know, the Israeli intelligence is finding out that they're being attacked by the TikTok videos that are coming in over their phones.
Yeah.
Right. And they've caught this.
This is
So-
awesome. Really quickly, and this is why I tell you got to have Professor Sleboda on the phone, on the show to talk about these things. This is just awesome.
Oh, you mean talking to the professor, not the brutal attacks?
Okay, so here's something that has been floated around, right? People like Vanessa Beeley have said this. Fiorella has talked about this. It wasn't just Hamas. It was more of a Palestinian resistance coalition. Is that true or false?
It was a coalition of forces that are within Gaza. I have not seen any evidence that that the PLO, Fatah, any organizations outside of Gaza were involved in this, right? It was Hamas, it was, Islamic Jihad, and a number of other smaller partners that are in Gaza. But there's no evidence that anyone from the West Bank, which is, right, there's 2 million Palestinians in Gaza, 3 million in the West Bank, and then millions more refugees around the world, right? But I haven't seen that. So, I mean, it's not impossible that someone else outside could have been involved, but their discipline was very tight. They kept this very quiet. And they didn't tell Iran, they didn't tell Hezbollah, they didn't tell anyone. So I don't think anyone in the West Bank, that they don't have the best of relationships, were involved. So calling this a broad Palestinian resistance, I think would be not really.
Okay. Let's talk about Hezbollah while we have them there. This is a picture right here. Oh, do you have something else to say to finish up? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay,
please.
So why did Hamas do this? Right? Did they just want to kill Israeli civilians? I mean, was that just the goal? No, of course not. Right? Yeah. Did they? Yeah, they were brutal. Right? Israelis are brutal. They kill Palestinian civilians every day.
Okay.
Right? I mean, yeah. Right. But you don't have to you can say the tactics are wrong, sure. But what was their real goal here? Right? All right. It wasn't just terror. Right? They grabbed large amounts of weapons, right? They attacked Israeli garrisons, barracks, the militarized police stations, and they had whole floods of people whose only job was to go in and grab all the ammunition, all the armaments, they got 40 armored vehicles, everything, snatch and grab, bring it all back into Gaza. All right. So they got that. All right. That's good. They got some hostages, right? What did they want hostages for?
Exchanging of prisoners. Yeah.
Yeah, there's 5,000 plus Palestinians held by the Israeli government, right? They consider them hostages. So, they want a trade. They've done that before. But there's more than that. They expended a huge amount of resources, of military, political, everything to do this. And it wasn't just for those reasons. Those were little side benefits, right? The reason they did this was to stop that Saudi-Israeli normalization deal, because they knew that if Saudi normalized relations with Israel, the rest of the Arab world would follow suit, and then there would never be any hope of any Arab support for Palestine into the future, and Palestine would just wither away and die.
Okay.
That is why they did this.
You're making Hamas look like a bunch of geniuses right now. Not just on the operation.
If you're in a prison, you saw Escape from Alcatraz. If you're in a prison, this is, look to me. It sounds like stuff you hear about some prison.
All right, let's piggyback on that what Kurt just said there really quickly, because this is, when your backs are that far against the wall, when you're going to be in prison for life, isn't it? I mean, I've said before, and we have a little section of this. Did they know it was coming? Right? When you talked about it, and I think we should piggyback on that. There's so much to talk about this whole situation.
I thought what he just said, I was leaning towards that because as soon as I saw that Netanyahu was like, "Oh, this is a great plan to build them up and work them against the West Bank," it sounded like the kind of buffoonery of like a prison guard that doesn't know his job, and the prisoners put together, the prison, like if you were paying the Aryan Brotherhood in some Supermax prison, you're like, how did they do this?
Yeah.
Why wouldn't they do it?
Yep. But also too, Kurt, that, and Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, to stop that over there, because dire straits, if this goes through, then the Palestinians are pretty much done. They'll be out of Israel, completely ethnically cleansed.
It seemed like
gone,
a nothing
right?
to lose thing to me.
That's what I'm saying right there, what Kurt Metzger is saying right now. Their backs were so far against the wall, they had nothing to lose. The blockade has been there since 2006. Go ahead.
Die fast, die slow, right? Maybe if we go out in a bang, maybe the rest of the Arab world will remember we exist and might just come to our aid.
And I've been told by my Arab friends who are like, we don't like Israel, but we also don't like them. So nobody cares about these people. What would they do besides that? Literally, no. The people who say they care don't care. It just looks like the kind of thing that happens in a prison, and it's brutal when that happens.
Okay, so Mark, I don't know how long we have you for. What time do you don't have a hard out? Do you? We didn't get a hard out from you, so because there's
no.
All right, good, because I have a lot to talk about. I have a lot of questions before we get to Hezbollah and what you're saying to me right now. And a lot of people I don't like Hamas, but right now, from what you just said, Hamas might have just saved the Palestinians for quite some time right now.
Well, maybe it depends on how this plays out. But they were screwed either way, and this was the play they made. It was brutal tactics. It was also well executed. Now there is a game.
Hey, come see us doing the live shows. We're going to be in Dallas, Houston, San Diego, Bloomington, Illinois, Indianapolis, Levittown, New York, Red Bank, New Jersey, Wilmington, Delaware, Covina, California, Burbank, California, and Oxnard, California. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for all those tickets. See you at a live show.